Hello everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda and welcome to this training video on the future of the stock market according to Warren Buffett. Now we all know who Warren Buffett is, but what was fascinating about his most recent annual shareholders meeting, which by the way was conducted virtually because of the situation we find ourselves in, was what was fascinating was what he said and what he did not say. In this training video, I'm going to talk to you about what Warren Buffett said during this recent meeting. Obviously, you've heard about the fact that he sold all of his airline stocks. But I think what was even more fascinating is what was not said. So again, in this training video, we'll talk about what was said during the meeting, what he did not say during the meeting. And I think when you read between the lines, what he did not say was in many ways more valuable than what he said, and I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. What really jumped out at me from this particular annual shareholders meeting that was completely different from all the other meetings in the past, what Warren Buffett is doing right now. In other words, is he investing right now? Is he not investing right now? We'll go over that, and then in the end, I'll share my personal opinion about all of this, how I'm adapting my investing strategy and how you should too. So with that being said, let's get into the training. But before we get into it, if you are a member of our community, welcome back. If you're not a member of our community yet, please consider clicking the subscribe button below. Please smash the notification button so you get these updates immediately. And please click like, because it really helps the YouTube algorithm. I'd really appreciate it if you can do that. So with all of that being said, let's get started and let's go ahead with this training. So let's get started with some of the things that Warren Buffett said that really struck a nerve with me, because Warren Buffett doesn't usually talk like this. Before I get into what he said, let me tell you about an op-ed, an article that Warren Buffett wrote a month after the collapse of Lehman Brothers back in the midst of the financial crisis in 2008. His exact words were, and I quote, "In the near term, unemployment will rise, business activity will falter, and headlines will continue to be scary. So I've been buying American stocks." So the key here is he said that he continued to buy American stocks even though the economy essentially crashed in the middle of the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009. So he basically said, look, even though the short-term headlines are bad, I'm not wavering in my belief in American companies and I'm buying stocks. And that really was very important, very profound. And let's now take a look at what he's talking about right now. So what did Warren Buffett say now at the most recent annual shareholders meeting? His exact words were, and I quote, "You can bet on America, but you kind of have to be careful on how you bet, simply because markets can do anything." Now, normally, Warren Buffett is very positive, very folksy. He's full of certainty about the future of America. And I do want to be clear, Warren Buffett did say nothing can basically stop America and you can bet on America. Now, these are his long-term proclamations. Presumably, the way I read it is 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. But if you look at Warren Buffett's actions, because at the end of the day, individuals can say what they want, but investors, they vote with their wallets. They vote with the decisions they make that affect their finances. Warren Buffett basically sold all of his airline stocks. He completely liquidated all of his positions because he doesn't know where air travel is going to be in the next few years. But let's take that one step further. Ask yourself, has Warren Buffett bought any stocks with the recent crash, if you will, or with the recent correction, if you will, in the stock market in the last couple of months? The short answer to that question is no, he hasn't. Warren Buffett hasn't bought anything right now, and he was asked about that, and I'll get into what he said when he was asked about that. But the key here is that under normal circumstances, back in 2008, Warren Buffett continued to buy stocks. Right now, he's waiting and watching. And his exact words were simply because you want to, again, I'll read, "You can bet on America, but you kind of have to be careful about how you bet, simply because markets can do anything." So this is the Oracle of Omaha. This is arguably the most well-respected investor in the world, who's basically saying that he's uncertain about where the market is right now. Now, all of us know about the EIDL programs, the paycheck protection programs, the stimulus payments, the unemployment with the $600 federal booster shot, and all the other proposals that are floating around in Congress. But when you peel back all the layers, what Warren Buffett is basically saying is he's a little bit concerned about the future, and he's trying to make us look at everything objectively and with a certain dose of reality, if you will. I personally think that this is something that policymakers, that investors should look at very, very closely, because Warren Buffett never usually speaks like this. Although his long-term economic outlook is strong and it always has been. And I share that economic outlook because I think long term, nothing can stop us. But in the short term, Warren Buffett has basically said he hasn't bought anything. So, when one of the world's most famous investors tells you that despite a market downturn, he hasn't bought anything, I personally believe that that should be something that's concerning to all of us. In fact, when you look at his statements, he specifically said, we have not done anything because we don't see anything that is attractive to do. So, again, you have Warren Buffett, who normally jumps at lower prices, who tries to find stocks at below market values, who tries to find stocks at a low intrinsic value, who now says that he's not looking to buy right now because he doesn't find anything attractive just yet. And in fact, Warren Buffett, being a big student of history, talked about the stock market performance all the way from 1789 all the way till today, and talked about how the stock market and how the American economy consistently grew. He also pointed out the period from 1929 to 1951, that is a 22-year period where the stock market took 22 years to recover from the crash that happened in the late 1920s. That again is something really worth thinking about. Warren Buffett also talked about the potential for a second pandemic wave. He talked about permanent changes in consumer habits. He talked about potentially people not wanting to be as excited about flying anymore, which, by the way, is why he sold all of his airline stocks, because in his own words, they don't take half measures. They felt that they're not sure about the future of airlines, so they just liquidated their entire position. So Warren Buffett, the world's most well-respected investor, is basically saying that he feels the world is likely to change for many years to come. And this is where things get even more interesting. So Warren Buffett's company, Berkshire Hathaway, has $137 billion of cash on hand. And he was asked, hey, what are you going to do about the $137 billion? Are you going to invest it? Are you going to buy more companies? Are you going to take bigger positions in any of your existing companies? And his words were, I quote, he said, that $137 cash pile isn't all that huge when you think about worst case possibilities. Now, I want you to really think about that, because what that's telling you is that Warren Buffett is saying that $137 billion, might not be enough because things could potentially get worse. His exact words were, we don't prepare ourselves for a single problem. We prepare ourselves for problems that sometimes create their own momentum. So what Warren Buffett is basically saying is things could potentially get worse, and you could have a cascade of events. You could have a whole bunch of problems. The thing that comes to mind immediately is, what if there are a whole bunch of insurance claims against Geico, which is one of the companies in the Warren Buffett portfolio, and there are huge insurance payouts that the company has to make. So you have, again, Warren Buffett, the world's most well-respected investor, saying $137 billion on cash is not enough if things start to get worse. And on top of that, he hasn't invested in new companies, which basically means he's holding on to the cash pile, presumably to buy a company that comes along or to prepare for the worst if things get worse. And let me give you one more example of how things could get worse and actually affect the Warren Buffett portfolio, and for that matter, affect the entire banking system. Again, these are Warren Buffett's words. When he was asked about real estate, he said, if you've owned a shopping center, you've got a bunch of tenants that don't want to pay you right now. And the supply and demand for retail space may change significantly. So what he's talking about is landlords potentially not getting rent from their tenants in shopping centers. We're not just talking about renters and those who have mortgages, residential mortgages, but we're talking about commercial tenants who are unable to pay their rent to their landlord. And now the landlord cannot make the payment to the bank that the landlord owes money to, which could potentially have implications for the entire banking system. In another training video, I talked about how JP Morgan, Chase, and Wells Fargo have actually temporarily halted home equity lines of credit. It's never really happened before. I mean, you think about home equity lines of credit. It's your money in your house, which you should be able to tap into. So if banks start tightening their belts, if banks start saying, hey, I'm not lending money, and if banks say, hey, I'm not collecting the money that I'm owed because of all these big loans that I've given to these commercial landlords, that could impact the whole financial system and slow down the whole economy. In fact, let's talk about travel. Warren Buffett talked about the potential for travel being impacted in the future. Think about it. If individuals don't travel, it may sound theoretically possible that, oh yeah, we'll do a video call or we'll work from home. But think about it. If people don't travel, then that results in a reduction in the overall economy. That that just overall has a negative impact on the economy. Now, keep in mind, Berkshire Hathaway has investments in JP Morgan, Chase, and Bank of America. In fact, Bank of America, Wells Fargo are part of the 5 biggest holdings of Berkshire Hathaway. Other holdings include Coca-Cola, Apple, and American Express. So Warren Buffett has a lot of equity in the banking system. And if these banks get impacted because they're not collecting their mortgage payments from residential homeowners, if they're not collecting their payments from commercial owners of shopping centers and owners of other huge commercial establishments, that impacts the bank's bottom line. So overall, in fact, here's another interesting thing that Warren Buffett said. He said this is a very good time to borrow money, which means it's not such a great time to lend money. So essentially, banks in Warren Buffett's interpretation, at least how I interpret it, are going to want to tighten their belts and not lend as much money. I mean, again, if they're not letting us borrow from our own home by way of a home equity line of credit, you can start to imagine what might happen. I have an American Express working capital terms program, and I just noticed when I logged into the working capital program account that the available credit had gone to zero, presumably because American Express is also tightening their belt and is not lending out as much as they would in a normal economy. And if that tightening of credit starts to go through the economy, then the economy can't function because the economy relies on credit to function. So all of these things are creating a slow moving train wreck, if you will. But again, I don't want to be all doom and gloom in this video training. I'm a student of Warren Buffett. I believe in the future of America. I myself am an American success story, and I do believe that we'll get to the other side of this. In fact, Warren Buffett specifically said the American miracle, the American magic has always prevailed, and it will do so again. And I'm certainly sure that it will. And he basically said, I don't believe anyone knows what the market is going to do tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. And I talked about this in another one of my trainings, how not to invest during this crisis. In another one of my trainings, I talked about how a lot of individuals are rushing to the stock market in the hopes of getting a good deal. You've probably seen other YouTube videos that talk about the fact that Warren Buffett sold all of his airline stocks. This isn't about the moves that Warren Buffett made or did not make. This is about what Warren Buffett said, what he did not say, and our ability to read between the lines. My personal opinion is you should not be investing in the stock market right now for the next several months. I know I'm not. Some of my biggest holdings include Apple, Visa, and MasterCard, and I bought them many years ago. I'm a buy and hold investor like Warren Buffett. I personally don't have any exposure to airlines, but this channel is about your overall financial health and stability. I'm not trying to give you quick ideas on quick stocks that you can buy and make money tomorrow. That is not what you're going to get on my channel. What you're going to get on my channel is sound financial advice so you can become a better long-term thinker and a long-term planner. You need to buy a company, and again, this comes from Warren Buffett. I can't take credit for this. You need to buy a company that you can hold on to for many years, because you need to think about a company as if you're buying a piece of a business. And when you invest in a company, when you find the right price and when you find the right investment, you need to not take any half measures, which is essentially what Warren Buffett did. In fact, he didn't take half measures when it came to selling the airline stocks, and he liquidated the entire position. In the end, I think we're all going to be okay. I do think that it's going to take longer than many of us expect. I also don't believe in any short-term trading, in any short-term tactics to try and make some quick money like that. I think that if we have some savings, we need to just wait for the right opportunity, wait for the right stock at the right price, and all of us need to do our own research about which stocks we're interested in at which price. I personally am a long-term investor. I don't do any short-term trading. And that's not something that I'll talk about on this channel. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you're a member of our community, thank you so much for being back. If you're not a member of our community, please click like, please click subscribe, please smash the notification button so you can get instant updates whenever I release a video training, and please comment below. I'm looking forward to creating a community and overall all of us becoming smarter and better investors. Thank you so much for watching.